What is up, guys? Welcome back to Nitro Union, and welcome back to part 2 of the 34 Ford Forest Find, Barn Find, whatever you want to call it story. In this episode, I'm in the hot seat because this is kind of my foray. Once we got the car back home, we started we got it unloaded, started just kind of going over it, doing some investigation. If you saw the last video, highly recommend you do if you haven't. You can tell that the car had a old roll bar in it, and seating position was way different. The steering wheel had been moved back, everything was cut out, firewall was gone, and all that stuff. So obviously somebody had set an engine way back in this car at some point, and it was more than likely a drag car, which had the moon fronts on it, had an ISKI cam tag on the dash, and all that good stuff. So we got to digging into it a bit more, and a buddy of ours came by the shop, and he recognized the motor mounts. He said those look a lot like Hemi motor mounts, like early Hemi 392, 354, stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, so I hopped online, looked it up. Sure enough, and what it looks like they did was they just literally cut out the cross member or pieces of frame that those motor mounts were mounted to, pull the whole thing out of the other car, just like little sections, and welded them to the frame in this 34 Ford. And the Hemi would have been set way back behind the dash. So we did a little more investigating, didn't really get much further on it, couldn't find a whole lot of information on the car, but we knew it was obviously drag raced a long time ago. So we ran into another guy that used to be from the area at a swap meet about a week or so later, and Dad was telling him about the car because this fellow is somebody that's always kind of been in tune with the pre-war car market. He knows where all those pre-war cars are. He's got a 32 Coupe himself, has had 34s and stuff like that. Actually looked at this car back in the day, so he remembered it. And he was able to offer a good bit of information. He said, yeah, it was definitely an old drag car. He remembered that it was orange whenever it came here in the 70s from the whatever owner that this fellow bought it from. It came up here in the 70s sometime. And the car was orange and had a name on the side. And the name was Nervine, Nervine. So I did a quick search of Nervine, whatever. Didn't come up with any car stuff. It seemed to be like in the 50s or, something like that. They had like this back of the magazine kind of snake oil elixir that's supposed to calm your nerves. Who knows what was in it. But anyway, and he actually remembered how the name was kind of written on the door. So he did a little sketch for me and emailed it to me of how he remembered it being. So I was like, cool. Well, now we got a little something to go by. So in the next month or so, we knew the Louisiana Dragway's reunion was coming up in Houma, Louisiana. I figured it'd be cool to maybe kind of mock the car up and take it down there, and maybe somebody would recognize it. Because I figured it'd be a lot of old timers there, that may recognize the car. So that's what we did. We worked out a deal with another buddy of ours, swapped an old blower for a Hemi engine, old 392 Hemi. And so we mocked it up in this car, just set it back in there and used a 2x4 as a temporary cross member, and we just had the block and the heads and valve covers, and that's really it. But it kind of gives you an idea of how far the engine was set back. I mean, it's literally under the dash. So it's pretty radical. So we did that. We kind of hung the fenders on it and got everything to where it was stable, and loaded it on the trailer, took it to Houma. And then once we got to Houma, we backed it into a spot, and man, it was a hit. Like, everybody was, just crowded around it. I mean, of course it looks cool. I mean, it's got that cool factor of, old rusty stuff. So we all love that, or most of us do. I know I do. So, and the fact that it's a 34 Ford, I mean, that's just, it's a pretty wild thing, So, so people crowded around it, and another buddy of ours came by, and he's like, hey man, that's crazy. Pert recognized this car. And I was like, oh, he's like, oh, you hadn't talked to Pert? And I was like, no, hadn't talked to him. So anyway, I went and found our buddy Pert, ran up on him down there and talked to him. And he's like, yeah, I remember the car. He's like, I didn't go to the same high school, but I was in the same area and about the same age as the guy that built it. His name was Billy. And he also told me his last name. And I had no idea how to spell it. So he told me a little bit about it, and he said, yeah, it was orange. It was called Nervine, 34 Ford, used to race, back in the early 60s. So I was like, well, awesome. So that gets us kind of to the next step. So nobody else down there really recognized it or knew much about it other than him, but it was crazy that we knew him. It was a friend of ours that recognized his car. So we're kind of putting the pieces together, bring the car back home, and I jumped online immediately, jumped on Facebook, searched the name, and his name came up, Billy. And then there's another one that had the same last name. It was in the same area, so I was like, well, she's got to be a female. She's got to be related to him, maybe his wife or daughter or something like that. So I messaged both of them, and I knew it would probably go to message requests. So I was like, it's a toss up as to if they ever find it, but at least I know that they're there and are recently active, on Facebook at some point in the last 10 years probably. And I felt confident that I could track them down, so, if they wanted to be. Of course, like I said, I wasn't trying to be weird or anything, but, really would like to have some information on the car. So sure enough, lo and behold, a day or so later, the lady messaged me back, and that's his wife, and they were together back when he was racing this car. So she remembered about as much about it as he did. So she had him give me a call, and he had unfortunately recently had a stroke and was kind of recovering, so it was kind of hard for him to get his thoughts out, verbally. But I just wrote a long list and made notes of, everything he said and all the stories he told and stuff like that. And the car he built the car in '61 to drag race. His dad helped him out some. He worked at a body shop, so they painted the car there. It was orange, and I believe he said that it was like the same orange that was on like the highway trucks or something like that. It was cheap, and that's what they had, so that's what they used. And then it had some like very minimal pinstriping on the hood, some black pinstriping and stuff like that. And then he explained the name. He's like, yeah, it was I named it Nervine. And he said the reason he named it Nervine was because his mother would get so nervous when he, about him racing this car that, her nerves would just be crazy. So he would always tell her, he's like, you need to get some Nervine. And like I said earlier, Nervine was like a kind of a snake oil type product that you would see in the back of magazines, little ads and stuff like that. It's supposed to calm your nerves. Like I said, who knows what was in it or what drugs were in it that are probably illegal now, but that's what it was, So anyway, so he named the car Nervine for his mom being nervous about him drag racing it, and I thought that was a really cool story. And then talking to Billy further, he built it with an Olds engine in it, and it was more in a stock location, so it still had the factory firewall. It was set forward. It was an Olds and had 2 4s on it. He couldn't remember a lot of specifics on the engine. And he said that he would run the car without fenders in C altered, and then he would put the fenders back on the car sometimes and run C gas. So thought that was really cool. Of course, me being kind of one of the gasser guys out there, like that was awesome because hey, we found an original old gasser. But he did say that he was more successful running the car C altered. So it seems like most of what you see is in C altered trim. And he said that he did win either a national championship or a national event. I wasn't quite sure on how to make that out, but I haven't been able to find any old records from those. But I believe that was at Laplace, he said. And he ran Laplace, Hammond, which was an airstrip, Opelousas, all those old Louisiana drag strips, ran it from 1961 to 1964. And he recalled, putting the moon discs on it. He talked about how the moon discs were kind of the cheapest thing that he could, do short of doing magnesium wheels, but he couldn't afford magnesium wheels. So the moon discs were on the front. Those were the original wheels and discs to the car, which was really cool. They came with the car. But he ended up selling a car, or his dad, he kind of lost interest. I think he was, in school and, doing all this kind of stuff, starting a family and everything. So he kind of lost interest. And his dad actually made a deal and sold the car in 1964. But he, since his dad did the deal, he was kind of off, out of his hands. So he didn't have any idea where it went after that, So now my task is, okay, where did this car go and who put the Hemi in it, So I did some more looking, and we just couldn't really find anything else out. Billy also mentioned that he used to have a lot of photos and trophies and stuff like that from that time of the car, but unfortunately they lost their home in Katrina and all that stuff with it. So sad deal, man. There's so much stuff lost to Katrina, and with Ida, we're still dealing with Ida, and we're 100 miles inland. And Ida was pretty rough here. We just got power back to the house, but it's nothing compared to how it is, in Louisiana. It's just horrible for so many people down there. But so keep those people in your thoughts and prayers. So unfortunately, all that stuff was lost. So I was like, well, okay, it's going to be a task to find photos of this car, but that was really my goal. I wanted to find some old photos of it, so we kind of knew what it looked like and just could kind of prove, hey, this is the car. So I kind of forgot about it for about a year or so, and then one day I got tagged in some photos on Facebook. Sure enough, there's 2 photos that somebody posted, and it says they're from Laplace. 1963 or 4, I believe. I'll flash the photos up here so you guys can look at them. But that's what they said they were from. I'm not 100% sure that they're actually from there because it's a big group of photos from different time periods and stuff. And but like I said, sure enough, and then Billy's wife commented and said that's definitely it, because he remembered the little helmet. It was like kind of a lid white helmet that he had, and she remembered it. So I thought that was really cool. But it was such a big relief to find photos. But that would have been when he was running the car early on with the Olds engine. Maybe a day or so later, a fellow commented on this photo and said, "Hey, that's my dad's old car." And I'm thinking, okay, I never really got from Billy if he actually had any kids or not. I didn't really know, but he had a different last name. So I'm like, well, surely it's not his kid. This has to be the son of whoever bought the car from Billy. So I'm like, yes, so it was awesome. So I immediately messaged him, commented under his comment, was like, hey, I'd really like to talk to you about this car. If you remember it, if you have any photos or anything. He's like, yeah, I've got, I think, 1 photo of it, and there's probably some home movie somewhere, So I actually called and chatted with him on the phone, and he was a really little kid whenever his dad had the car. But he said his dad bought the car and put the Hemi and stuff in it. They actually had another car that they ran, and I think they pulled the drivetrain out of it and put in this one. They kind of cut it up and moved the engine back and did some modifications to it, but it still ran C-altered. And this photo is actually a color photo. And it's the only one that he's got, or that he's found up to this point of the car. And it was when his dad had it, and you could tell they set the Hemi back and they ran the header, so they cut kind of right in the, right behind the hood. They actually cut holes in the body to run the headers out through it. So you can definitely tell the difference in between the 2 photos. But so he didn't remember what happened. His dad had unfortunately passed away, and didn't remember what happened to the car or anything like that. He was just a little kid. He said he remembered getting up in the car and playing in it, as a kid, but didn't have any knowledge of where it went after that. So I kind of did a little more research, but I was like, I have no idea where to turn from here. Maybe unless some more photos or something pops up, or something like that. Maybe somebody will watch this video and see, But so really through that time, I haven't been able to find out any other information other than somewhere but in that gap between the mid 60s up until the 70s sometime. I'm going to say mid 70s maybe, when it made its way here to our little area in Mississippi. Like I said, we're about 90 miles from New Orleans, so it made its way up here somehow. And this fellow that bought it was actually the fellow that we got the car from. He hung on to it for all that time, and he bought it with the intent to build a street rod out of it, because the street rod thing was being a big deal. But lucky for us, I guess, that never happened. Unfortunately for the car, it went downhill a lot during that time, but it still is what it is. It's a 34 Ford 5-window coupe, and as far as the food chain of pre-war steel cars, it's pretty far up there. So it's a pretty amazing find, and this is something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. That day of going and getting that car is almost like it's almost like it wasn't real, and a lot of people commented or a few people commented on last year, that car's not worth anything, it's worthless, it's too far gone. But if you know these cars, it's not too far gone. They make everything for these cars. We would definitely love to build it back as it was drag race. That would kind of be our style. to put it back as it was raced in the 60s. And as Billy had it, I think it would be cool with the Hemi in it. The Hemi kind of adds a little bit of stank to it, so kind of somewhere in between those eras to kind of pay tribute. That's what I would do to it. Some other people may want to do something else, but anyway, it's a really cool car. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and I'm glad you guys really enjoy these stories, and I hope you don't mind me telling this part of the story. I was a little more familiar with it because I kind of did a lot of the legwork on researching for it. But I hope I didn't leave anything out. And if you guys would like to support the channel more, NitroUnion.com, that takes you straight to the store. You can buy t-shirts, stickers, stuff like that. But we really appreciate you guys either way. Thank you for watching, liking, subscribing. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't. It really helps us out as well. And we'll see you on the next one.